For those of you that I haven't met, my name is Craig Yateman. I'm a partner at WVA Academy. Colleagues on the call in Bali, Liesl, Richard. We had quite a big registration number for this call, but I guess a lot of people are hoping to just pick up on the video if they're not able to get in today. So for those of you on the call, if you're new to a WVA Academy Cafe, the way it works is this. You talk a little amongst yourselves in small groups, then we share a little bit of what we think might be interesting. We go back into small groups and then we debrief that in plenary. So this is not a monologue. And for those of you who might find that as a surprise, I really hope that you'll stay on the call and not drop off when we try and drop you into small groups. You'll meet some really interesting people. It will help you grow your network. There's some wonderful practitioners and experienced people on the call. And then what we share with you is hopefully something that gets you thinking or gets you talking. So to start with, the topic today is developing change capability with a focus on the internal practitioner. What can an internal practitioner do and what can't they do? What is an internal change practitioner? And to try and take maybe a slightly different look at that role. The reason this came up, for me at least, was we got a brief to help a large client. Large meaning, one of the really big machine type bureaucracies, and their problem was that they have some part-time internal practitioners who are responsible for change. So it's in their job descriptions. They are to assist or help or support change programs. And apparently what's happening is that they're getting into meetings and they don't know what to do. So I started to think about that. It's not, we're not talking about the change leader. We're not talking about, Cotter's guiding coalition. We're talking about in a large, industrial kind of organization, these people who are identified as internal change practitioners. So Liesel's about to put you into groups. She's hopefully had a bit of time to think about how she's going to do that. And the questions I'd like you to at least discuss in the group, obviously, please introduce yourselves if you haven't met each other. But what in your organization makes for a brilliant internal change practitioner? So just get your head into the space by thinking about this idea of what is it that makes for a brilliant internal change practitioner, and how is this different from an internal change capability? How does it relate to an internal change capability? What else is there in internal change capability? We have about 9 minutes because today's talk, as are some of our talks, is a little bit dense. So there's quite a lot of content still to come. And Lisa will track you for about 9 minutes and then whiplash you back. We'll debrief this for 1 or 2 of you. So please try and notice if something interesting comes up in your group, and we'll take 1 or 2 comments after this. Then we'll share our content, and then we'll have the larger debrief after the next breakout. Liesl, please go ahead and invite people to their rooms. So the questions we left you with was, what in your organization makes for a brilliant internal change practitioner, and how might that be different from internal change capability? I don't want to debrief every group. So for those of you who've been around for a while, was there something interesting that you heard or would like to share? And in the group I was in, Samuel, Christelle, Gillian, I guess we relied quite significantly on Samuel to be our primary voice in the group. So either Gillian or Christelle, if you're happy to share, if there was anything that struck you. And any of the other groups, was there anything that you thought was noteworthy? If you had something to share and it was interesting, what was it? Put your hand up and then we'll call you as we As we can, I'd love to hear from one or two of you before we move on. Thanks, Cecil. That's a nice idea to pop it in the notes. Cecil, just give us a quick snapshot of that. Take a 30-second view of that with your words so we can hear you. I'm not sure that everybody on the call knows you.
Yeah. So Skolka and Tandile are practitioners, change practitioners themselves, and they said it's the credibility and the trust of the individual and the gravitas they carry. And then Anita added the concept of being a good listener and collaborator. And nobody said anything about technical expertise or anything like that. But it was about those capacities of the person. And we didn't get to question 2.
Thank you, Cecil. That's great. Anybody else struck or want to acknowledge anything they heard? Otherwise, I'm going to move on. So this is your opportunity right now to speak.
Mbali and Dustin have their hands up, and I might as well just start. Dustin will come after me. What struck me in my group is what Karen shared with us about not inviting change champions based on seniority or positions in the company, but rather inviting people based on how they're able to bring people along, the kind of people that are usually the ones to mingle with everyone in the office, they're known in the office, and they're able to collaborate with people. And another point was bringing along the known critics, the people who are usually looked at as maybe people who usually complain about stuff. And I really appreciated that because it aligns with my thoughts of always inviting resistance and actually hunting for it and looking where the resistance sits in the organization. And being a critic doesn't mean it's a negative thing. It actually helps the process become even better. So I appreciated what Karen shared with us.
Thank you, Mbali. Dustin, you had your hand up. I can't see it now, but please do come in.
Thanks, Craig. We took a different perspective. We looked at it from the change practitioner already being a professional and understanding the different models and understanding the change process. So we leaned more towards actually having the institutional knowledge, understanding the environment, and having an appreciation for the context of where the business is, and overemphasizing communication, keeping the business engaged, ensuring that they understand where the change process is and what's coming next. I think to really center it around the people and not so much the process or the application or the system that is behind the change, but really how is it actually impacting the people, and to have somebody with that kind of disposition and really drive it from that perspective. Thank you.
Thank you, Dustin. And I think, you know, I think we've got our head into the space now. We've got this idea of what we're trying to talk about and what we're wrestling with today. So let's take a look at what it is that I've prepared for the discussion. Yeah, and I hope that it's interesting, and we'll debrief it in a second. So firstly, what do we mean by internal change practitioner, the definitional issue? So in a small organization, I think we're all pretty clear that in a small organization, this role of the change practitioner might well be the CEO or the MD or the manager who came up with the idea of the change. So we'd call that the leader or the sponsor of the project. Might also do the change practice in a small organization where one person might know all things and all people and all systems. So we are, you know, I think the idea of an internal change practitioner really lends itself to, you know, medium and large organizations where the person who comes up with the idea of what it is that needs to be changed: a new system, a new culture, a new process, a new branch, a new division, a new product, some kind of change that usually originates in the line managers. But the organization is too big for that person to lead the change personally, and they need some kind of extension. They need an extension of themselves to help to drive the change. So in that search, we have the appointment of internal change practitioners, either part-time or full-time. I'm specifically excluding contractors because, you know, a contractor would not belong, would not be an internal change practitioner, even if they wanted to belong. And they mandated partially or fully to support change from state to state kind of idea. There has to be some change they're consciously and intentionally a part of. So an extension of, and I put careful, a careful leader. So some leader who cares enough about the change to put somebody out there to help them and not just smash it through by decree. Careful, filled with care. An employee, not a contractor, mandated partially or fully to support change. And then I thought, what don't they do? You know, this might help you think about this role. They don't define the change. They don't originate the change. They are not the line. You know, one of the people in our breakout group, you know, a youngish person in a vibrant organization, doesn't matter where you are. You could be in HR, you could be in accounting, you could be in operations. But if you're a young person inside an organization, and by young, I might be playing a bit loose with it, like, you know, like the ANC Youth League does. Youngish, you might look at the organization and think things should change. And that makes you the change originator, and things work differently. So this is not the change originator. An internal change practitioner in a medium to large organization is not the line. They don't resource, they don't you know, equip the change. That's done by the sponsor or the leader. They don't project manage the change, and we'll touch on that in a second. The idea of the internal change practitioner in these medium and large change programs is separate from the technical aspects of the change. It's usually focused on the human aspects of the change. As Cecil pointed out, nobody looked for technical skills in this change role. There's an assumption that this change role is about the people end, and that there's a project manager and a leader or sponsor that are handling the technical end. And we'll come back to this. So you're not project managing the change. You don't benefit from the change. You're not the shareholder. I mean, you might own some shares, I guess. But in these medium to large businesses, you're not the, you don't get a massive check if this change goes through. This is a bit of a provocation. The change practitioner's work or life doesn't change. If you're a change practitioner, you're a change practitioner, and you're helping other people get through the fact that their life is changing. Their way of work is changing. They may lose their job. They may, you know, a different system. But if you're the change practitioner, you're the change practitioner who's gone to the next change practitioner projects. You don't have to change yourself. But maybe you are changed through the experiences, and we'll maybe talk about that in a second. So, all right, you can decide if you like or dislike this definition and provocation, and there's an opportunity for you to like work with that in the next breakout session and give some feedback. What are they chosen for? What do you look for when you look for these internal change practitioners? And some of this came up in your opening. Trust and relationships. Okay. Organizational knowledge. I think that's pretty clear. Their ability to facilitate change and provide support and guidance, because if they understand the need for the change, they can mine for resistance. And we'll talk about those things in a second. Yes, an ability to communicate and engage. Yes, an ability to lead by example. immediate availability. Of course, if they're internal practitioners, they're there. And they're kind of cost effective because you're not paying contract rates, and they've got cultural understanding. So this is why this is a list, a full set of why you might choose an internal practitioner over an external consultant. And then, I don't know if you look at this the same way I do. I look at that list and I just have that song from, I think her name was Loney Anderson or something like that. And she sang that song, Oh Superman. Oh Superman. Are you looking at a person who has been in the organization long enough that they are trusted and have a deep network of relationships? They understand the company's structure and processes and culture. Do you know how few people actually understand their own company's structures, processes, and cultures? How many of you, just check in with yourself. Do you understand all of your organization's structures, processes, and culture aspects? When you can understand the need for change, mind for resistance, okay, there's some knowledge aspects there. You've got the ability to communicate up, down, and sideways to address concerns, 360-degree stakeholder engagement. So up the line, down the line. Samuel sitting at a large industrial firm, ability to do that is difficult. Leading by example, immediate availability and cost effectiveness and cultural understanding. And you know what struck me? I don't know if it strikes you, but I found that I felt as if I was looking at a leadership development program. That this list of requirements for a great internal change practitioner looks like a list of the kinds of things that we'd want first line and middle managers to start gaining. Build trust and relationship, develop organizational knowledge, be able to facilitate change, because by its, the essences of leadership is about change, leading, through some kind of change process. Yeah, leading by example, there's the word. So I kind of thought, what kind of organization A has a whole bunch of these people available? Lots of them lying around that you can suck onto a project. And B, that these people would be somehow separate from your high performance or fast track leadership development program. So whether it's useful or not, I thought one way to build internal change capability is to hardwire all change programs to your leadership development program. Whatever leadership development program you've got going, hardwire it to your change programs. And at frontline and middle managers, make them a part of all change programs as internal change practitioners during and after the duration of those programs. So how do you do that then? I'm going to give a nod to ProSci here because, they've really thought about certain aspects of change, not the structural stuff, but the human part of change. And in ProSci's world, they start off with the PCT triangle, the ProSci change triangle. It's available, you can Google this stuff. So please, if you're new to the change world, go and have a look at what ProSci's got. And what ProSci says is, firstly, be clear about the success stuff. So like any good leader and any good change practitioner would need to get really clear on what success looks like. And then there are three separate roles. There's the kind of technologists handling the leadership, sponsorship, and project management. Now, guys, this is the sort of broad conceptual stuff that is assumed in the ProSci models. So someone's going to be the leader or sponsor or driver of the change. Someone's going to handle project management, and a third person or third party is handling change management. And that change management is the people side. So if you believe that change management, project management, and leadership sponsorship should all be done by the same person or by one team, then you try and figure out how that was all combined. But in this approach, change management is not project management and is not leadership sponsorship. Well, then apply ADKAR. Now, again, if you don't know the ProSci models, ADKAR is the change process for an individual in the ProSci model. So I'm not trying to reach out and I'm not pushing specifically worldview knowledge. I'm just using ADKAR. Now, ADKAR stands for awareness, desire, knowledge, ability, and reinforcement. But we're not asking the change practitioner, the internal change practitioner will first have to do the ADKAR on themselves. They must have critical awareness. So they've got to have a deep understanding of the required change. To have an internal change practitioner who doesn't understand the change would not make sense. They've got to be able to reflect on their own desire for this change. They've got to have an internalized need, both for the change to happen and to help others through it. And I believe that if they don't have both of those, they can't really be an effective internal change agent. So to have passion both for the change and for seeing people through it. The organizational knowledge, so the knowledge that they need is all that stuff that was on the previous slide. You know, this deep organizational knowledge. Yeah. They've got to have quite a range of human abilities, you know, skills, communication skills, facilitation skills, negotiation skills, mediation skills, empathy, an ability to empathize, ability to reflect on themselves, and an ability to help people process loss. And if you know, if you like, we can talk about any of those in the breakouts. And then, of course, reinforcement. There's got to be some time that they stay in the program and help the change to come through. So for those of you who are even vaguely familiar with ProSci's work, we often think of the change practitioner as applying PCT and ADKAR to others, but the first would be to themselves. And that would also be part of your selection criteria, is to have internal change practitioners capable of this work. And again, you see that it starts to look like a leadership development program again to me. So I'm about to put you back out into groups. Liesl, you can get yourself ready. And in recap, you know, what we're saying is internal change practitioners over external change practitioners. And we do know that good practice is both. What does the internal change practitioner not do? Well, they don't define the change, they don't resource the change, they don't project manage the change, they don't directly benefit from the change, and by and large, their world doesn't change. They have to have an ability for trust, organizational knowledge, communication, leading by example, and so on. And if they're going to use a change process or a change program, they'd need to be able to apply every aspect of it to themselves before they could apply it to others. And then there's this, how do you find such people? Where would you find such people? In the South African context, firstly, mind the diversity. We know that South Africa, unlike other parts of the world, has a massive range of diversity. There's some lovely podcasts from Rassie Erasmus talking to his new Irish, you know, assistant coach, or the returning Irish assistant coach, Felix Jones, about the comparison between training in Ireland and coaching in South Africa and the variety in South Africa. So that is a factor. And then a quick recommendation to all of you. Adam Kahane released his latest book in 2025, Everyday Habits for Transforming Systems. If you can afford it and you've got a little budget, it's a great book to give to your internal change agents, or maybe, you know, buy a copy or two and have them as a book club inside your business. Or if you're trying to learn about change and change management, some beautiful approaches. And you can see the connections here. Adam talking about 7 practices for being an internal change practitioner. Acting responsibly, relating in 3 dimensions. And if you know, he talks about agents, parties, and kin. Looking for what's unseen. So mining for and recruiting resistance, which Mbali was talking about. So paying real attention to, looking for, hunting for resistance, so we can look for what's unseen. Working with cracks, so changing systems through the cracks in the system, not smashing them down completely. Experimenting a way forward, collaborating with unlike others, and persevering and resting. All of these were written by Adam Kahane for work at local levels. So you don't need to be the person who's initiating the change or driving the change. You can apply all of these at local level, and Adam's written beautifully about that in his latest book. Right. So take a beat and think, what is your reaction? What are you feeling and thinking right now? What more can we say about the internal change practitioner? I need to ask Samuel if I can have his permission to have some of that conversation that we were having in plenary. Samuel, is that okay? I mean, you can decide what you do and don't answer.
Yeah, you're welcome.
So for those of you who've got the time to stay past the 10 o'clock little click, because sometimes we have people dropping off on the hour, Samuel's been involved in change at Sasol for quite some time. So if you think about large organizations and the role of change inside large organizations, as Samuel said in our breakout, he's got the scars. And you might want to take some of these stories. So if you're comfortable, I'm going to ask Samuel a couple of questions and he can share his experience with us. And then it's up to you guys to dive in and join in as you see fit. Is that okay with everyone? Samuel, firstly, you know, you talked about 2 things that that should have been added to the list of what internal change practitioners don't do. One of them about the comms and the magic of change, and the other is as you know, who's the leader. Do you want to expand on that just slightly?
Yeah, please help me if I forget my story there. But I think the one thing is the expectation that as a change practitioner, the moment that you are part of a project, all communication gets diverted to you, and because leaders are usually seeing the first experience of change is the communication that happens around that, but they don't necessarily understand all the pre-work that needs to be done. So we've in Sasol, the expectation is many times there, but we get the internal communication people to get involved, and we guide them on what the communication messages are. So yeah, I can build a PowerPoint slide, but there are much better people to do that in the organization. The other one, I think you were referring to those last 2 bullets. Their work doesn't change, and they don't have to change themselves. Because you're part of an organization, and we've had a few of those swings in the organization, because sometimes they centralize it, sometimes they decentralize functions, and sometimes they scale down on functions. So personally, I went through, while we were guiding a process, we also retrenched some of the change managers in the organization. The other story that I shared is that I was moved from one part to another part where nobody spoke to me, exactly against all the guidance that we've given in that particular process. So because you're part of the organization, you get affected by the change, and you also need to deal with your own change and carry the burden of change for large parts of the organization. The other thing you mentioned, and my line manager at the moment, she used the sentence. So what part of you being the leader don't you get? And that refers to me to the fact that you say, but if you look at all those attributes of an internal change practitioner, looks pretty much like a leader task sheet. And as an internal practitioner, you need to help or hold the leaders accountable for leading the change. You cannot lead the change and communicate the change. You just enable leaders to actually do it better than what they skilled for.
Thank you, Samuel. That was also an important distinction for me. So the assumption of where is the change practitioner being a leader, and where are they enabling the core leader or the central leader who they're supporting? And I think that distinction is interesting. I guess in a large enough organization, how do they get that central leader's voice and head, hands, and heart into all of the local situations? And sometimes they've got to represent that person in those local situations, and that representation moment is curious. The last thing I just wanted to quickly touch on with you, Samuel, is this, and you please, if you only talk about it to the extent that you can. My understanding is that there at Sasol now you've got this team of, I think if I understood correctly, 6 or 7 core internal change professionals sitting in this unit. But obviously 25,000 employees, 6 people only scaled so far. Just before we were whiplashed out of the meeting, we talked about HR as an extension, or HR as a multiplying force. I assume meeting most of the criteria. They're internal. They are asked somehow in their job descriptions to be part of or to give support to these change initiatives. So it's part of their job. I don't know if there's any reflection you could give on how that might be working. And straight after that, guys, I'm opening up to anybody else who wants to either share what happened in your group or your thoughts, or build on what Samuel said. I just thought this is a great opportunity for Samuel. So maybe take us out with this thought, Samuel, and then let's see where the group takes us.
Yeah, I think for me, the differentiator between a change practitioner and a change agent comes in here. Where your change agents are, in many instances, people on the ground, people where the change is an addition to what they do, we look for people that are actually have an interest on the impact of organizational change on people. So if you can identify them, in our case, it's formalized more in the HR environment. But when we work on projects, you identify people, and they can come from any business function to play that role and be almost like a ear on the ground and a feedback loop on what is actually happening, because you just don't have capacity to really have the finger on the pulse right throughout the organization.
Right, over to the other groups. What came up for you both in your group discussion and in what you've heard from Samuel? I'll give an opportunity for anybody to volunteer. And then if you're all being a bit shy about coming forward, we'll start to go for group 1, group 2, group 3. This was group 1's debrief, so If nobody is putting their hand up, Liesel, you can tell us what who was in group 2.
Group 2 was Anita, Sissel, and Skulk. I think Skulk might have a few things to say.
I thought he might, you know.
Yeah.
I was curious. But Anita has not been a wallflower in previous meetings either.
Skulk was nominated to speak for us. Maybe he just stepped away for a second. Maybe we can move on and come back to him.
It looks like we've lost his signal.
I think we've lost him, yeah.
Yeah. All right, let's loop back if he doesn't come back. Next group.
That's wrong. He's gone. Room 3 was Richard and Sindiswa. Somebody else was there in the first breakout who left, and Lebugang, who joined late, was added.
Sindiswa, anything that came out of your group?
I don't know if anything stands out, Richard, or Lebugang, please feel free to add. We spoke quite a bit around how your definition of change practitioner had that humanist focus, which came out of our first conversation. Because so often we spoke about how what gets measured gets done. And it is rare in organizations, at least in my experience, to find the human experience being something that is measured, something that is tracked, something that is visibly held and kind of everyone has line of sight of. So what tends to happen in change projects is that the project plan becomes the thing that everyone is obsessed about. How are we doing in terms of time, budget? Are we meeting the milestones? And that often eclipses the actual human experience. And I also shared how so many in our client organizations, there's so much change fatigue because there's so much coming at people from so many different departments. Each one has their own, priorities, that the change practitioner role that you defined up front is such a necessary component to systemically hold things together and have line of sight of what are the demands on people in an organization. Have I missed anything? Richard, Lebugang, please feel free to add.
Well, I guess Lebugang's coming in. There you go,
Okay,
Lebugang.
thank you.
Well,
Sorry, colleagues, I can't share my face because I'm a bit I'm feeling a bit under the weather and I'm in my PJ. So out of respect, I'm not gonna share my pic for now. But anyway,
Lebugang, you've piqued our interest. We just want to know, what is the latest fashion in pajamas. So, be brave. Otherwise,
let's leave that for next time. What is more important is my influence at
okay.
this stage. Yeah. Anyway, yes, colleagues. Yeah, over and above what Sindiswa has shared, I also raised the issue of internal practitioners not being valued that much, no matter how much you know about the change process and what have you. I shared an example in my own organization whereby we went through a change, like a major change, legal separation. And we want the organization to say that much as the business is transforming, we also need to take people along, your employees, otherwise they will be left behind. And not much was done about that. And only now is that I've been brought into the team to try and assist with the change management side, on the people side. And I think that is a key problem for internal consultants or practitioners. If they have to be listened to without a positional power, in most cases, you are not listened to. And that's the main problem and frustration on my side. And this is what I have seen mostly in my career, that the people that are listened to are mostly external consultants who come in as as change practitioners to come and advise the organization and do that. And you, as the internal person, you are often overlooked. And yeah, that's the problem. Yes.
Thanks, Lebogang. And it reminds me of something that one of the people in our breakout group talked about, that not only you as the internal practitioner might not be listened to, but in some places, change management has a bad reputation. And I have a friend who runs a ERP implementation house. So they help medium and large companies do upgrades and and roll out new ERP systems in a particular domain, finance and operations, which is quite hectic, and they absolutely hate change managers. They tell the story of a change manager who slipped on a green leotard and danced in the hallways of as a rollout was happening, as if this was going. And these IT guys were just thinking, what? So they are the technical side. They don't understand what the green leotard was meant to achieve. And in your case, as you say, that even if you are the prophet at home of risk and the prophet of change, sometimes you're not listened to. Samuel has a great story which he might share to you about how the internal experience enabled them at Sasol to stand, as he put it, in front of a steam train and convince line managers to stop a change that was going to be damaging. But Lebogang, you have to have a lot of internal credibility to do that. So thank you very much, Lebogang. Skulk's back. So
Thank you.
I think, Skulk, if you've got a few words for group 2, you can run, but you can't hide, Skulk. So we wait.
Thanks. Thanks, Craig. Thanks also my colleagues, Cecil and Anita. Please just chip in. I think what we also say was essential of your expected outcome of the change. So if we look at the transactional change, which is more focused around a process, perhaps an external person can come in, change the process with that knowledge and walk away. It's a very in and out process. But if you look at more deeper transformational change in terms of beliefs and the way we're doing, an internal person do have that knowledge, and a transformational change is going to take time, which is building on a lot of things, trust and consistency. That's going to work. Perhaps the internal person is going to be the way to go. Also, there's doubts, I think, that came up from Anita. If you get in an external person, it's the accountability, the commitment, all of those things are in doubt. I'm not saying it's going to happen, but those things are in doubt. The change person, we believe that the person doing the change will also go through a change himself, because it's a learning experience. It's also a transformational change for that individual, the way we see things. If we then focus on the outcomes of the transformational thing in people, culture, strategies, and compared to the transactional thing, which is just processes. Just lastly, Anita mentioned a very good thing. It's how do we put enough emphasis on coaching the change person? Because we expect the change person to do the change, but what support is there? What coaching is there? How are they going to do that? Because they also need to do a certain process. And if they haven't got the support, they're vulnerable out there. So that is a very interesting aspect that came up. And I think my colleagues must just add where we probably have missed a couple of things. But yeah, I will stand with this at the moment.
Thank you, Skulk. And yeah, I think to some extent, the distinction Samuel made between the change practitioner and the change agent is helpful, because in that idea, I think Samuel communicated that the change practitioner is probably seasoned, experienced, and very well trained. The change agent might be the person that needs some sort of coaching. And then if you don't have the internal bandwidth for the change practitioners to support the change agents, that's the first place you might want the external partnership to happen. So those external consultants are providing firstly some sort of framework, either yours or, you know, they're working with ProSci or they're working with something else, and then providing that coaching and support to the change agents. So developing that, and then, you know, I keep coming back to this. If you're going to go to that trouble and you're identifying those change agents, link it to whatever leadership development programs you've got running, because it's such a golden opportunity to make the connection between these are the skills that you're going to need to lead. Deep organizational understanding, deep understanding of change, compassion, empathy, communication, negotiation, etc. So you might as well learn those things. Was there a fourth group? I think it's Mbali and yeah.
There
who
was,
in
yeah.
that
It was
group?
Mbali, Levine, Jeline, and Karen.
Who's speaking for your group, Mbali?
Levine graciously agreed to bring our summary.
All right, Jadine, whatever happened in your group, and any other reflections you've got on what's happened so far? And you'd need to unmute before you start talking, Levine. Don't be like me and speak while they're on mute.
Well, wanted to do what you want better. I wanted to run away quietly. Thanks for putting me on the spot, Mbali. Not like I don't have enough anxiety already.
I know, sorry.
So, with regards to our group and discussions, I think our colleague also mentioned that where we are at the moment, we need to read more into the whole change aspect and, you know, educate ourselves a lot more, since time has also changed compared to what we are used to, and the way it's going into the future. So that is something, that's a topic that it's ever changing. So we need to keep up with it. The other thing that was also mentioned is when change practitioners are identified, I think it is automatically presumed that they will run with the change. They know what to do, and you did mention that they also require some sort of grooming before they can cascade the message through to the change agents and below. On our side, we are currently going through change, and I can fairly say that I am in a situation where I have staff below me, and the anxiety levels for myself is extremely high because of the uncertainty, because the identified change practitioners are not fully equipped to provide the proper communication that is needed for us as change agents, like you call it, to then cascade confidence when we are promoting the change to the lower levels. And it makes the process very difficult. And so it's not necessarily that the people we do identify, or however they do get identified, do understand change fully, or understand the processes of change fully to be able to lead other members of staff to help them get the message across. I'm not sure if Mbali, you want to add anything to it.
Thank you, Levin. That's just about it. And just to add, another point was when are the change practitioners invited in the conversation? We talked about how most of the time the change practitioner is brought in to here's the concept, here's what's happening, please implement and make sure this is a success. And we were talking about how they should get a seat at the table during the deliberations, in the discussions. And I think Lebogang brought a very good example of that, of just being brought in later on to just do your thing, you know, do your magic as the change practitioner. But you yourself were not even there in those conversations and might not understand the change fully. And we also talked about the commitment from the change practitioners from themselves. When they understand exactly what's happening, they themselves need to buy in and commit to the change before they can transfer that onto the people and bring people along and guide and all of that. And that's about it from our group. Karen and Jolene, anything we left out?
No, I think you covered it well. I think we were grappling with the differentiation between the change agent and the change practitioner a little bit in the roles and so on. And we spoke a lot about the emotional burden that both those roles carry in terms of, you know, the anxiety and things that are being said. That's pretty much it.
Yeah, and that's definitely out of the provocation that I put at the beginning. I specifically put the word provocation on the slide because I knew it might be a bit of a challenge to say that the change agent is not changed or not affected even. And I'm so glad that pretty consistently those with experience have called out the BS in that and said that that's just nonsense. You know, Samuel talked about sometimes knowing what's coming and knowing what's going to be affecting your colleagues and carrying that weight. Even before the change has begun, carrying the weight of knowing what's coming. Yes, and something very useful about separating the notions of practitioner from agent. And I wonder in Levine's case, who's the practitioner, who's the agent? And what must be true is that what in one organization like Sasol is change practitioners with a certain level of competence is not true for all organizations. Not all organizations are 25,000 people, but even if you are 2,500 people, that's too much for one leader to extend, and you've got to have some kind of network of change agents. And where do they get their skills? How do they get aligned? How do you make that work? Is interesting. You please put your hand up if you feel now that you want to say something before I close out. Otherwise, I'm going to start closing out the call. Going once, twice.
Craig, sorry,
yes, please, Samuel.
I don't know how to put my hand up in Zoom.
Neither do I.
So just one thing that Lebogang, or okay, that one, Lebogang and Skalk mentioned, and I think we call it fighter cover for change, and it's the ability of leaders. Fighter cover for change. To do the change management work, you need to have buy-in from executive leadership and maybe a sponsor for change management in the organization. If you don't have that, it's an uphill battle, and typically what Lebogang shared happens with you. So building that sponsorship and getting that fighter cover is, I think, key to be effective.
If I could ask a follow-on, which is, let's say that I think a change is important, but I can't get a sponsor or fighter cover for it. What happens then?
It remains an uphill battle.
Thank you.
Unless you can convince people and build a bit of a momentum, but I don't think that happens very often in organizations that, from a change practitioner's perspective, can drive that.
Yeah, I think we had, this is particularly for one of the people in our breakout group who was saying, you see the need for change, but you can't get the executive support. And if you can't get the executive support, you need to look at the gray hairs and the scars on the back of people who've tried to drive change without executive support. Please save yourself the pain, stress, and anxiety, and rather use that for something more interesting like hang gliding. I'm going to share the some of the closeout slides. It doesn't mean you are not welcome to keep chipping in, but I want to see if I can bring this home. Some of the things I was thinking about as we closed it up was three types of agent, three types of change person, change practitioner, change agent. We use this language, and I've got a type 1, a buffer. So in type 1, some kind of loving, helpful wall between the scientists and the people, between the project managers and the people. Some kind of person who's really concerned with and for the human aspects of change and trying to nurture and protect and support and comfort and carry. And let's call that type 1, and it's a buffer in the sense of a cushion. Type 2 is a bridge, so bringing together the leader. So this is in Samuel's thing where he says, the agent could turn to the leader and say, do you not understand your role in leadership? Do you not understand what leader means in your role? That's bringing the scientist to the people, making sure that they're invisible and in front and, and connected, but still acting as an extension or support of them, not acting in your own right. And then there's some kind of type 3, a catalyst. So much more agency of in change, maybe in part being a strong leader, maybe in part being a scientist, and in part being a humanist and connecting to people. And change agency, to my mind, must include at least these three possibilities: the buffer, the bridge, and the catalyst. And maybe that's just, trying to sound clever, but it was a concluding thought for me. In change, I think we acknowledge, all of us, that there's tremendous power in the internal network. But it's difficult. I hear the difficulty of identifying and harnessing that power. Those change. Listen to Levine's exhaustion of trying to find that competent change agent and change practitioner layer, particularly when we're dealing with wave after wave after wave of change. So to me, if you're going to go to this trouble and try and find these people, I think what you're actually looking for is your leadership pipeline. And I suspect that if you make that more obvious, if you say, those of you who volunteer to be change agents are, in fact, being identified, we're connecting you to the most powerful leaders in the business who are the ones driving the change initiatives anyway. We're making you visible. We want you on the leadership fast track. If you've got a high potential program, they should be earning points or credits for their work on these change programs. And at the same time, they're having to develop the kind of skills that I would suspect you want your leaders to have. So something may be useful in there. All of this, by the way, is, remembering that in Worldview's view of things, organizations are made up of structure and agency. The structures and the agency. And when you want to maintain or change the structure, the question is who gets invited into the room? Who is in that boundary conversation? Who is in the possibility conversations? And Samuel opened with that. He said, in the Worldview keep reminding us that when are the change agents brought in? And Barley brought us back to that as we were coming to the close. So if the change agents are only, or practitioners or professionals are only brought in after the framing of the issues being done and the contextualizing of the issues being done and some choices being made, well, You know, I don't think they get that kind of leader commitment to the change that we think is good practice. But all of this is design. All of it is design. These decisions about who's in the room, when are they in the room, how do we make change, how do we do change, is a design conversation, and that's going to be our topic for next month. Who designs the organization? What people and what forces? Organizations are designed, even if not by design. There are forces that shape them, and identifying them and knowing how to work with them is useful. I hope that you can join us. I am hugely appreciative of every single one of you on the call, and I'm sure that you all join me in being doubly appreciative of Samuel, who I think was being very generous in sharing some of the experience coming out of Sasol. But to every one of you who participated, I really appreciate it. I learned today, so thank you. And we hope to see you at our next cafe.